What do you mean by that's how you find Jesus? I hope you're picking up on the fact that to find Jesus is not to look physically for Jesus. I hope you're picking up on the fact that if you want to find the Spirit of God, you want to find the love of the Father, you want to find those whom God puts His attention on, go opposite of where the systems of the world tell you you'll find Him. And right there is where He will reside.
Amen.
And when you find Him there, the people you find Him on or around or touching their lives will be the last people we would expect, because that's where they found Jesus. And He's not born in Jerusalem, and He's not born in Rome. If He's born in Jerusalem, then He tilts towards religion. If He's born in Rome, then He tilts towards power. But He's born in Bethlehem. Bethlehem sits right up next to a village called Ephrathah. And Ephrathah is a place that means the place of the ash heap. It's the place where everything is burned down. And God decides that if He's going to wrap Himself in human flesh, He's not going to come into the world at the height of religion. He's not going to come into the world riding the back of power. He's going to come into the world where everything in your life is burned up. He's going to be birthed right next to your pain, right next to your heartache, right next to your loss. If Jesus is coming on the scene, you can guarantee it's going to be through an unwed mother, the end of a bunch of astrologers' journey, with field hands hearing the good news, and He's going to be born in the most unexpected backwater town you can ever imagine, because you won't find Him when you're at your best. You'll always find Him when you're at your worst.
Amen.
It's as if He just camps out right next to you and says, this is where we're going to bake the bread. Because, by the way, Bethlehem means house of bread. So where does He start baking the bread? Wherever you've burned everything else up in your life. In the middle of your ash heap, He comes to show you how to eat the food of the Father. And He arrives on the scene because that's what it means to find Jesus. So church, that should be the Jesus we start by showing. Because I have a feeling that the people who are looking for Jesus are the very people who Jesus appears to in the nativity story. They're the very people who need Jesus, what we would call through the lens of this world, who need Jesus the most. And so that should be the gospel that we portray. So when they walk in, they don't sense judgment, they find Jesus.
Amen.
When we encounter them on the street, they don't feel as if we look down our nose at them. Instead, they find Jesus.
Yes.
When we find people whose lives are burned out and burned up, they don't have anything to offer us. They can't put any money in our offering. They can't contribute to our bottom line. In fact, their very reputation might hurt us in the community. Open wide the door. You might have just found Jesus.
Amen.
It's the very ones that Jesus came to come up out of the ashes with, to say, if you rise, I rise. If you fall, I fall. So that you'll know when you go through the pain, I don't stand on the other side of the pain beckoning you onward. I go through the pain with you. Because I wasn't born in Jerusalem and told you to get there. I wasn't born in Rome and told you to rise up. I was born in hell so that you could be born out of hell with me. That's how we find Jesus.
Amen.
That's where we find Jesus. And church, if that isn't the Jesus we preach, I dare say we've missed Jesus. Even while singing about Him and shouting about Him and witnessing about Him, we missed Him because we missed Him in the unwed mother and the astrologer from the east and the hired hand in the field and the backwater village where He doesn't belong. If we miss Him there, we're going to miss Him everywhere. Because if we miss Him there, we'll miss the most obvious advent of Christ, the most obvious arrival. But it's not the only place in the Bible where we find Jesus. I told you as we started, what I really like to do is I want to show you Jesus in His first advent, because you can find Jesus in all these peculiar people in the Jesus story, of the Christmas story. But of course, it's not where the story ends. In fact, it's where the story begins. The Gospels explode out of the nativity story, and in some cases, they skip the nativity story altogether. Only 2 of the 4 Gospels actually tell of the nativity story. Some of the Gospels have Jesus immediately going to work. Boom, go to the River Jordan and get going with ministry. You look, for instance, at something like Mark, where Jesus is immediately healing the sick, immediately casting out devils, immediately going into the wilderness to face the devil. You look at something like John, where in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And here's John rewriting the creation story and sticking Jesus smack dab in the middle of it, because that's another tip. If you want to find Jesus, read about God and insert what Jesus looks like into that story and you find Jesus. And so the Gospels begin to unfurl and we see Jesus healing, we see Jesus feeding, and we see Jesus loving, and we see Jesus laughing. We still don't see Jesus landing in all of the spots that you should land if you're trying to build something big. You know, if you're trying to build a kingdom or a following or an army, he's hanging out with the wrong people. And he's hanging out in the wrong buildings, and he's not making friends with the right leaders. I mean, you just look at his disciples, and he's got the wrong guys following him. He doesn't have real good theologians. He doesn't have anybody with pull. The people he had with money are accused of stealing it off of everybody else. He doesn't have much to pull from, and every time he opens his mouth to preach good news, he loses someone else who's disappointed with him because he isn't the Jesus they hoped for. As you read the Gospels, you start to realize that the Jesus they hoped for was going to beat up Caesar in a very literal way. And then when they found out they were following a guy who told them to turn the other cheek, people started to turn away. That's not the kind of leader I'm looking for. And they started to go find somewhere else to go.